very much for showing up for the very last panel of these exciting Cyber Investor Days. My name is Peter Rost. I have the pleasure to welcome you and to welcome the distinguished panel here. Our discussion, because this is the Cyber Investor Days, is also to better understand and maybe develop ideas and a position on the industrial policy in the European Union, on the European continent, including the UK, to understand how we can better and faster develop our very own sector, either from a startup, a scale-up, an established player perspective as a cybersecurity vendor, as well as from the investing side, capital perspective. We in Europe have actually a long history of industrial policy. Europe itself, after World War II, was created. The roots are in the European steel and coal community. In the 1960s, the aircraft industry by itself started consolidating inside Germany and later on was developed. And imagine, that was on December 18th in 1970 when Airbus was created, first as a French-German, later on including the Spanish and other companies. So that was results of industrial policy on a European level. And why was that? During the war, aircraft manufacturers from other continents, not to mention the big B company, they became a global monopolist. Europe had to do something, and they created something, and today Airbus is bigger than all of its competitors. That was maybe a successful example. But let's move on. What happened in the 90s or early 2000s? We had an economic crisis, then we had a demand crisis. What happened to European cybersecurity industry? In the year 2008 and 2009, the question for the German government was, should we save the only remaining European memory chip maker, a semiconductor company? And that was not a small piece. That was a 4 billion euro revenue company with 13,000 employees, high-tech people. Should we save this company, or should we save a car manufacturer? Well, the car manufacturer had twice the number of employees, so they rather saved those votes than half of the votes belonging to high-tech technology. So then the last European memory maker was gone because of lack of a German and a European perspective. Now Thierry Breton is coming back and say we need to reconstruct the semiconductor industry in Europe. It's quite an expensive and I wouldn't say hopeless, but a very challenging thing. And what happened next? Just 4 years after the semiconductor failure of a non-existing policy, Germany said, now we do an industrial policy for photovoltaic industry, for solar energy. There was in 2012-13. We are going to put a lot of money inside. We are going to subsidize people who buy photovoltaic equipment made anywhere. So what happened is the consumers happily put photovoltaic cells on their roofs in Germany, and well, they chose the cheapest available stuff in terms of electronics and modules. So what happened? After a very, very short search, the German photovoltaic industry went bankrupt. The Chinese basically earned all the subsidies. They profited from it, and the German industry was dead. And now we are trying to repair that again. So if you have no money, like in semiconductors, it's bad. If you have a lot of money, but deploy it the wrong way because your industrial policy is not well thought, it's also bad. So shall we create a European cybersecurity gigantic player, or shall we subsidize demand for cybersecurity? Shall we better and more put regulation in place? Shall we deregulate things, or shall we put lots of carrots, like tens of billions of money, into the deployment of the solution? Should we put more in research? These are the questions that we would like to deal with in this panel. That's it for the introduction. Let me now allow the panelists to introduce themselves one by one very quickly. Virginia, why don't you start?
Okay. Hello, good morning, everyone. I'm Virginia Albizuri from ITP Aero. I'm the Security Governance, Risk and Compliance Manager, and what is my task is I work for security, which is in this company is leading all the kinds of security: the physical security, the cyber security, and the information compliance and data protection. So it's all in the same one, and I'm responsible of protecting the data, the personal and the non-personal ones.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Martin Ruubel. For my background, I haven't really had a decent job since late 90s. I've been doing startups. Back then they were known like unsuccessful companies, but you know, we have gone better at startups, at marketing there. So nowadays I'm running about 3,000 people, like mid-size digital transformation and cybersecurity company called Nortal. Before that, there were like Guardtime, Dalgen, Nartest, like quite many startups. And also somehow, together with Gert there and Luigi and some others back in 2016, I happened to be there when we founded EXO. So the goal of the EXO was actually to, you know, make a dent in the European cybersecurity industry by distributing 450 million to R&D projects. So I've a little bit lived that as well as been in touch with about 20 actual projects in progress. So I have some experience there, but by no means am I expert in terms of industrial policy in general. But I do have opinions, so...
Thank you, Martin. Why don't you continue, Jalal?
Yeah, sure. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jalal Bouhdada. I'm the founder of Applied Risk, a Dutch industrial cybersecurity company that has been acquired recently by DNV. Currently, I'm also involved in the M&A parts within DNV, especially for cybersecurity, but also board member and investor for a number of cybersecurity startups at the moment. Thank you.
And Augustin.
Hi everyone, my name is Augustin Blanchard, and on this panel I represent the money, the investor side of things, together with Carlos and Margarida, with François as well, in the back, hiding in the back over there. So I'm executive director at Tikehau Capital, and my job is to finance cybersecurity startups, and cybersecurity startups only. So we only invest in cybersecurity. We have a broad definition of cybersecurity, obviously, and the fact that we have a 200 million fund dedicated to it for European companies. And we help founders of startups becoming founders of scale-ups and finance through Series A to C rounds the European cybersecurity ecosystem. And again, we have money.
Okay, so you see, we have a panel that unites different aspects, but our common goal is, and I'm sure we share this with you in the audience, is to grow the cybersecurity players that we have. The problem is just nobody knows when will we have enough and sufficiently grown companies. And I don't know, Joanna, if Thierry called you back, but if Thierry Breton would show up after this panel, what would we wish to tell him in terms of this is the cybersecurity industrial policy that we want from you? So let's work on this. What would be our wish list here?
I'm taking notes.
Please report.
Because my hypothesis is we have a vacuum. In Europe, we do not have a cybersecurity industrial policy. We do lots of things, but there is no industrial policy by the Commission that has the target. We want to develop this industry to that level of self-sufficiency for Europe, resiliency, all that stuff. But let's start with a practical thing. So your practical task is to keep your organization secure. And looking at the supply chain, the cybersecurity supply chain that you have, would you think the European cybersecurity vendor landscape is as developed, mature as you need it, or are you turning to cybersecurity products from other regions that may or may not, depending on the geopolitical solution, one day being cut off? Are you satisfied?
Yeah, that's one of the main concerns that we have with these new regulations that are coming up, especially with the certifications. That I believe that this regulation is going to be more tailored, or is going to talk with different stakeholders and to see, because the industry is quite different anywhere. So it's not, we cannot talk about the same cybersecurity for the same companies, right? So, our concern is that, for example, you've got the supply chain, and you can, as a big company, you can have your certification, you can be correct with the regulation, but what happens if all your supply chains, some of them are critical, and there are deadlines, then maybe they cannot get to that deadline, they cannot get to that point, and that could stop the production, for example. Or even in a company where we have shop floors, cybersecurity is not the same when you're talking of some scopes of companies, that another scope of companies that you have machines that are very high cost machines that maybe that you have to put some cybersecurity. That depends how the regulation is going to demand. You cannot get to there. So that's our biggest concern due to the regulations. This is a mission impossible. It all depends on how they are open-minded to all the companies and the countermeasures that they will leave us to apply.
Okay, thank you. So if you had the choice between a small European innovative IoT cybersecurity startup or an established player from anywhere in the world that would be large enough to fulfill your global demands, etc., would you take the risk of choosing the innovative, tiny European guy, which is not yet big enough, and help them to grow by feeding them? Or would you rather want or have to, because of risk minimization, have to choose the established, maybe less innovative, but larger player? What would be your first
Maybe
choice?
we will help the innovative ones, but we will hire the big ones.
Okay.
Just to have more, to be more confident on all the global scale that we're working. So.
Okay. Maybe, thank you very much for the time being. Jalal, you are also in the risk management or risk minimization business. What's your stand on this? Given the current cybersecurity vendor landscape in Europe, is there any incentive for people who are regulated to have risk management systems to choose European vendors? Or would you say there's absolutely no incentive now, and we would have to develop the industry in a way that allows more deployment from European vendors?
Yeah. So let me share with you my insight based on what we see from a demand from our customers and so forth. I think, to be honest, the industry doesn't care if a product is European or coming elsewhere. I think it's really, its focus is on quality as first, the value added, and the competitiveness. That's really what end customer is looking for. And of course, there is the sentiment, if it is European, it's an added value. So the market is pretty much open, and I think the cybersecurity is global market, and which means that when it comes to selection, especially in the context of small startups or scale-ups, in regards to the Israeli or American companies, I think really the focus there is really those KPIs needs to be checked, and that's what the majority of companies are doing. That said, there is other agendas for certain companies that are interested to develop and see also value add for them to drive and be involved in those initiatives. That's really what's changing the equation. But that said, I think it depends really on the sector, on the risk appetite, but also the maturity of organizations. So there is no clear answer for this. But I think really the short answer for this is really about value add, the competitiveness, and the quality. That's really what end users are focusing on at the moment.
Very good. So that effectively reduces, let's say, any kind of imposing a share of you have to buy 25% European as part of your cyber budget to a purely political discussion. So the market technically doesn't require...
In my opinion, I don't see this need. In fact, if we'll impose this can backfire against European companies in other regions, and you start to play in a field where there are some restrictions that will be imposed on European startup companies if they are trying to explore other markets. And that's something that we have really to be mindful of.
Okay, very good. So talking about the differentiation and the quality and the innovation, Augustin, maybe you have a couple of companies in your portfolio that differentiate and stuff. Do you see them capable enough to fulfill the real demands? Are they doing the right thing? Are they tackling cybersecurity at the root and not so much at the symptoms? Like the stereotype would be a Silicon Valley company would spend 9 out of 10 million budget in marketing and 1 million to develop kind of a Potemkin village or whatever, a snake oil thing, and market that heavily and get rich quickly. Whereas a European startup would tackle the problem at the root and would say, it's not that we need a better single pane of glass for no information, but we would say, no, let's improve cybersecurity in total. What's your stand on that?
Yeah, this is a broad topic. Okay, so in our portfolio, we have companies that automate cybersecurity, and we have companies that build securely natively secured environments by checking the code, for instance. And this is an idea that emerges within our portfolio and within how we should drive European industrial policy. Up until now, we believe that industrial policy for cybersecurity has been driven by R&D. And Europe promoted R&D subsidy, R&D improvements. Now we need to focus on growth for European companies. We need to find ways to promote growth and to help European companies grow because they have developed the technology, so they are ready now. And how to differentiate themselves from US players. And we believe that we have to make sure that our portfolio companies and our European companies focus on the right tool, which is build secured environment. Rather than build walls around your environment, we believe they need to help secure your environment, build better code, better software. And this is also a line of thinking for industrial policy, is to maybe have a regulation. I mean, we are between us, we can talk freely and throw ideas at each other. Why not simply make sure that we have a regulation saying software development companies do build better code? Because in the end, why do we have to build defenses and cybersecurity topics? Is because somewhere a guy wrote the wrong piece of code, and then there was a vulnerability. So yeah, maybe regulation and industrial policy around the whole shift left kind of scenarios where we build better products, better software products, better code, and potentially, and again, we are between us, we make the software development companies maybe liable for the code that they produce and that they sell. And this becomes, let's say, what we call an obstacle non tarifaire in French, a protectionist measure against other non-European companies. Because we in Europe, we want to build better software, better code, and make sure that it's protected securely and natively.
Very good. So that's a bold statement. And if there's any researcher here among you, please, your next research project, develop a method to exactly measure the level of software quality. I think that's an audacious challenge. Now, I want to move to you, because that picks up very well. So if Thierry came back and said, okay, here's the software quality regulation that you as a software user or deployer or as a vendor have to obey, would that put you in a valley of death, especially compared to US, Israeli companies who would not have such regulation, who would sell, let's say, banana software that matures at the customer? Still, you would have to fulfill Europe's regulation on quality. Would that help you in the market because it would be a protectionist measure, or would it kill you because you couldn't develop anything anymore?
You know, it's a really kind of a... Firstly, thank you for the panelists. It has been very interesting. I wanted to comment you, and now I especially want to comment you.
I have a target on my head.
No, you don't. It makes sense. Code quality is crap. Of course it is. And we should do something about it. There are like voluntary kind of agreements, and you can declare yourself being a high-quality software vendor and so forth. You know, it's all there. I kind of like it because I'm coming from Soviet Union. I really hate these kinds of draconian kind of you have to have a high-quality software or you will be fined, right? So amongst ourselves, no, I don't agree with you. But in principle, yeah, of course. That being said, I don't think the problem with cybersecurity is so much with code or technology per se. It's, you know, according to research, about like 20–25% of the cyber breaches originate from, you know, technological reasons and so forth. It mostly has to do with people not following processes, not having the processes, and so forth. So if we are kind of limiting our discussion with cybersecurity, I think that is part of it, but this is not really the main part of it, I think. So that's for this, but what you said, that we have the research and we need to grow the companies, I think you're absolutely right. I think this is the challenge we have in Europe, and the industrial policy plays a really big part, especially removing the internal protectionist like borders between the member states. You know, outside, I don't care so much, because that gives us bargaining power, right? But internally, I think the European Union has a role of unifying the requirements. This is ongoing, removing the barriers, so you don't have to, you know, graduate a certain German school in order to provide services in Germany, so which is the case.
Yeah. If you want to, Augustin, immediately react
no,
on the code issue.
On the code issue, agreed. I was being a bit provocative and see how the audience reacts, but.
Yeah.
I know it can. I mean, code quality, 100% code quality is mission impossible, as well as a well-working industrial policy. But let's put this aside. I mean, we should improve code quality, that's for sure. Growth, I agree with you. Unifying demand, and we are all for that. Having, I mean, the European Cyber Resilience Act, which is currently at the very beginning of the drafting step. I don't know if you've been on the website of the EU recently, but it's stuck in the drafting phase. So we need to accelerate this and making sure that we have. I mean, we as investors, we demand a unifying way of selling cybersecurity products in Europe. We are a European investor. We invest in German, French, Portuguese, Spanish cybersecurity companies, and they need to sell indifferently to German, Spain, France. So that's what we ask of a well-working European cybersecurity industrial policy, is to unify the demand and the benchmarks, etc.
Okay, so we put in Jerry's book, we put complete the task that Oettinger started almost 6-7 years ago when he vowed to create a digital single market, also for cybersecurity. It's there in some respect, but it's not there. And I can confirm that especially for business with governments, with national governments, who are a big part of the market for cybersecurity, it's different not only from member state to member state, where governments very often prefer local champions because there is no unified standards, accreditation, acceptance, approval, certification across the member states. So maybe a bit of deregulation here would help as well. But Jalal.
Yeah, so I think I have a different angle where I see this discussion going. So I think why don't we pause just for a moment and ask question, where are we in this space when it comes to cyber? And I think there are some lessons learned that we have to capture here just from what happens in other sectors. It's pretty much happening for cybersecurity. So there is a lot of dependency on others, while European companies are producing, but it's not the mass production that we're seeing from the US or other big players at the moment, which means that there is a gap that we have to look at it from a strategic perspective. So that's what we call strategic autonomy. So for long term, what's our end goal? Where are we heading? And what are the tactics and elements that will be required to make us successful and relevant for this space? So I think that's one part that I haven't seen the answer from a policy-making perspective, because there are some movement, but it's going very slow. So that's one part. The other part that I see where there are opportunities for improvement is across Europe. So yes, harmonization is there, but also the acceleration is lacking. So I think there are things that can be speeded up in different ways and bringing the collaboration in different terms, but also breaking this, sometimes the bureaucracy, if I might call it, that you might be facing in this part. And then going back to the role of the government, I believe that the government role can be pretty much positive and helpful in certain ways. So things about money and budget that can be available for R&D. I think that's something that can definitely, European companies can benefit from it in many ways. But also from the kind of legislation which should be also addressed carefully, because too much legislation, it's not going to help you. I mean, just going back to discussion about the code and secure development lifecycle, yes, I mean, those practices are existing at the moment, but if you will put more legislation in this space, it can be cumbersome also for European companies. So we have to think about it. But I see another issue which is a big challenge for us in Europe, and that's a reality that we have to accept. We are not producing enough engineers to have the massa of startup companies at the moment. And those are areas where, jointly with the government, we need to look how this will be captured in a new strategy, if you agree with me.
Very good. So the research and development, maybe just before you get the word, do you get enough talent in cybersecurity, or you say, oh, I'm hiring a new cybersecurity, whatever, expert, manager, forensic guy, response team. You say there's 10 people lining up, 6 of them women, so you get what you need. Or can you confirm what Jalal just said?
I mean, for security, it's never enough. I mean, we get talented people, and we hire as well talented companies. But it's true that it's something that it has to be that the companies have to invest more, especially when you come to the digitalization. That is going to increase. We used to have everything on premise, everything physical security, everything on paper, everything locked, but that's changed completely. So no one is going to get there to jump the fence. Mm-hmm. So now you have to increase all that, and the problem is to get that, to get the companies to think that that has to be, it's critical. That's the first thing that you have to invest in, even on premise, even outside, or suppliers or providers.
And how would you make the companies understand? Would you put more regulation, or would you put some money here and there? And where would you put the money?
Okay, the problem is that if you don't put regulation, it seems that you don't have, there's something of someone else, of the other company. If you put a regulation and you say, well, this is coming up, and you have like 2 days for getting this certificate, then it's like they're going to start. The problem of this is just always the awareness, the consciousness, or is what the security team is always doing in all companies, right? It's like just every day teaching everyone that you are the first one, that the security stands on you, relies on you, so that if you lock the door of your house, just imagine the rest of it. So, but more money has to be invested on it as well.
Martin, would you agree that additional funds are needed to train more skilled cybersecurity staff in Europe as part of an industrial policy, or would you say no, there's sufficient universities there, that's not the key problem? Your problem as an entrepreneur to grow more, faster against your global competitors is a completely different one.
I heard your question, but I'm not going to answer it right now. So I wanted to comment on regulation. So we always must remember that regulations only go one way. So I have never heard that somebody is coming up with a program of deregulation. So regulations go like pile on top of each other. We need to be very careful on that road. So yeah. Cybersecurity personnel, I mean, as a private company, if I'm not getting enough people from Europe, I'm going somewhere else. So, and this is what everybody is doing. So this is quite clear. When you think about how America has historically solved its skill cap, is they have brought people in. We don't really do that in Europe, so at least like in an organized manner, and I think we should, because
yeah, we see that
sense.
in artificial intelligence, where there's lots, at least, of German guys who are behind the ChatGPT and U.com and all those guys. It's guys moving because they get better conditions over there. So, but that's a private thing. I don't think it's so much a U.S. industrial policy for AI.
No, I agree. And you know, it's really nowadays quite good to be a European cybersecurity company, to be honest, because obviously our lunch is being eaten by the Americans and Chinese, right? But nobody trusts Americans and Chinese. So wherever you go in the world, somebody has beef with one or the other. Europe, everybody knows it's there, it's beautiful, rich, you know. So it's quite nice. It's quite nice.
So we should start like tell Thierry, okay, let's do a marketing campaign. Say Europe is just too naive to be dangerous. Trust us.
Well, if it's true, why not?
I don't think it is. We do have cyber criminals here as well. But Augustin, your face speaks.
Words. Louder than words. Now the words. I'm an advocate of what we call in French protectionisme éducateur. It's an old theory back in the 19th century saying, hey, if we want to develop a steel and a carbon industry, we need to have protectionism at the very beginning and then try to build our industry so that it can compete afterwards with worldwide demand and offer. Mm-hmm. So, in my view, regulation is a way to build this educated protectionism for a while, and making sure that European customers buy European solutions. And how could we do that? And this is another, rock or stone in the pond. Why don't we try to make sure that insurers can ensure European companies on the cyber risk. Right now, it's sketchy at the most. We need to make sure that we have the regulations so that insurers can make sure that companies are insured so that they can prescribe cybersecurity tools that are vetted by the regulators and by the insurance companies so that they can protect their premium-paying customers. And then we have the start of an offer in cybersecurity in Europe, protected by this protectionist educator or educated protectionism. And this is, in my view, one of the ways to go forward. I don't know if I'm clear because I made several steps and maybe I lost you along the way. But regulation is not bad, and regulation should be part of the industrial policy. And we want to find this path of growth. We want to make this to find this path of protectionism, in my view, and the whole differentiated European offering in cybersecurity, which is more shift left and native, securely, secured by design kind of environment.
So thank you very much for actually putting the elephant in the room on stage, because it's exactly one of the core topics that politics need to make up their mind. And whether it's globally politically correct or not, that's a discussion later on. But it's not as far-fetched maybe as you said. I remember France in the 80s, and you would turn on the radio and you would hear 90% English songs from the globe. And then they came out this law in the early 90s that said, okay, all radio stations are required to play 40% French singing music on the radio. And I was there as a student, and I lived the transition from 90% English to 60% English, because they wouldn't play German either. But anyway.
We like German songs.
Except for
I like
Patricia
German
Kaas. But
I can sing too.
But it's true that in the first time there was not enough music, not enough good quality French music. But the radio stations had to pay each artist for every time they play each song. So there was money coming in like crazy. Not a lot for the radio stations, but a lot for the artists. So then there was money coming, and then the quality of French music, by the way, increased a lot. By the way, the South Koreans did the same with the movie industry. They required all South Korean cinemas to show 50% South Korean-made movies, native movies. They didn't have any. It was completely crap, like Super 8 amateur videos were the first thing they did. But after 5 years, they got, I think, the first Oscar-nominated movie, because that helped. I mean, that approach is something that most likely should be discussed. And transforming that to IT landscape, like we do have a mandatory insurance for everybody who operates a car. In case they provoke an accident, that you make sure there is money covering the damages. So for everyone operating IT, should there be a mandatory cybersecurity insurance? That's a bit what I understood.
Roughly, yeah.
Would you think, Jalal, would you think that this would be too harsh and decreasing the competitiveness of European organizations operating IT on a global scale, or would you say that is just the right tool, and if we introduce it smoothly, that would be the best industrial policy that we could ever make?
I think it's definitely an interesting approach, but we have to look for the implications on short term, but also long term. I do agree that one size does not fit all, which means that for certain regulated, highly secure type of environments, they are actually doing that already. I mean, to be vetted to do business with certain sectors, you will go through a screening process. And maybe if you're not a national organization, you will not be able to do business with those. So the question that I would like to ask here, are we going after the whole market, all suppliers, or are we really looking in very specific sectors where there are concerns? And I think that's also part of the conversation. So the insurance will help, But the insurance will not tackle all issues because I don't see any restrictions why other companies coming outside of Europe, why you will not be able to establish this kind of insurance. So it's maybe additional cost for them, but there are mechanisms that you can have that. So I think it's, I'm a little bit skeptic about this type of actions because I believe that we are creating a kind of one generic approach for all companies. In fact, some European companies will suffer from this kind of actions. So that's really my perspective. And I look at Martin, maybe if you share with me.
Yeah, but, I mean, that's my business, so I don't mind if there's going to be a cybersecurity tax somewhere. So if they're buying my services because of that from the, you know, European greater good, I'm not so sure. But I want to say that there is a reason why Augustin is with the money. So you're absolutely right. This kind of educated protectionism is what we need. We need to be very sort of sure where we are building those walls, though. So are we building them around Europe, or we are building them internally? And right now we are in a stage where we have them internally in place. We haven't like fully learned to trust each other yet, and I think it's a process. And I think this is something that regulation has been aiming at for some time to make this common market a reality.
Very good. So now we have kind of a words first here on this panel. We have a natural-born entrepreneur calling for regulation, even protectionism. That's good. But I mean, Martin, you have really created successful companies. You sold them, you grow them, you continue to deal and wheel in that industry. Do you need any kind of help from the EU, or would you say, even if we don't do nothing, we don't develop an industrial policy here for Europe on cybersecurity because of people like you and your companies, and of the NIS2 and other regulation which is already underway, CSA, Cyber Resilience Act. We are anyway on a natural path towards European sovereignty or self-sufficiency in cyber. Or do you say no? We
No.
need... Okay. No?
No, we are not. I mean, when you look at who is... from my revenues, about 25% comes from within European Union. I mean, obviously, we are a small player. We make like 250 million a year or something like this. But still, European Union, we don't have a home market. Let's put it this way.
Yeah.
So we are also coming from Estonia. So, you know, building a wall around Estonia doesn't help much.
It helps Estonia.
No,
not even.
I don't think so, because there's not going to be a whole lot of innovation if you focus on Estonian market. So because it's so small, right? So, like by and large in Europe, I think it's mostly American companies in the western parts and Chinese companies in the eastern parts who are actually being successful and selling their stuff. European cybersecurity market from the vendor side is hugely fragmented. It is, you know, the easiest thing to become like a top 50 vendor in Europe in cybersecurity. So no, we are not there. We are definitely not self-sufficient and so forth. So again, coming back to our task is growing those companies from technologies to actual players. So you can use them, because let's be honest, startup comes to you, yeah, you will work with them, but you will stock them somewhere in the back in an innovation lab, right? This is what you're going to do. So this is normal. And because small companies are not built, no, other way around. Multinational corporates cannot work with small startups. They just don't have the processes. You cannot do that. So you need to be of certain size in order to be able to do that. And unless we are able to get European, you know, technology startups, lifestyle businesses into a certain size, you're never going to use them.
Okay, and that closes the circle because
Yeah.
that was the outcome of our round, at least, to ask the Commission to say, okay, please define what you want to, what kind of cybersecurity industry you want to have as in Europe politically in 5 years, in 10 years. Do you want to have the top 50 players and the smallest one should have 1 billion revenue, or you want to have top 50, the most technologically advanced, the most research publication and stuff, so Europe remains the think tank of it, but commercially irrelevant. So this we should ask like the Commission to define politically, but we want them to
But
do.
let's help them.
Yeah, and we want to help them. So now, dear audience, maybe now is the time that you help us on the panel. We would have, yes, Milda seems to be the first. Could you please get the microphone to Milda? We want you to help us with just in the previous panel, add some points, some questions that we for sure have missed here. We could speak on for hours, but we won't. So.
Okay, yeah, you can hear me. Yeah, so Milda, EXA team. So I had a question to Augustin and to Martin, because I kind of almost fell from the chair when you started to talk about this, educated protectionism. So my question is, when enough is enough? Because isn't it that the, protectionism and all the subsidies and grants that we really love in Europe doesn't stop the innovation, so that companies kind of doesn't become a bit lazy in fighting in the market? So.
Should I start?
Sure, but I'm going to be agreeing with you.
Okay. No, they cannot be lazy because they have investors forcing them not to be lazy. And this is our job. We finance companies so that they grow. If they don't, we pull off and goodbye. This is as brutal as it is. So
not all the companies have such a tough investors.
all the technology, most of the technology companies have investors.
Such a tough and demanding as you are.
No, we are all investors and we are all demanding. Ask the few investors in the room. They don't bear slow growth or poor profitability. It's not long lasting. So educated protectionism, in my view, cannot lead to being lazy because it needs to be seconded by various processes, financing that will prevent that from happening. Maybe I'm naive, but this is not how we want to build the European ecosystem. And there are counterfires to be created as well.
Anything to add?
Yeah, so I do agree with you.
But you have another 5-minute answer.
Sorry,
no,
I was so good.
No. When you have something fragile, right? So something that has potential, but that is right now fragile, you want to protect it, right? You want to make sure that they are able to grow, and everybody understands that, and all the measures are there in place. What comes to the laziness, I agree. Capitalism is a beautiful thing, really. So that drives it. So if you are able to become strong enough to exit this, because I believe what you said was that you get started with educated protectionism. You can remove it later, and you should remove it later. Because
when enough is enough. So when is the
Yeah, okay, Milda, maybe, thank you, the point is taken, but maybe summarizing this, what you two are asking basically, and maybe we put a nicer label on it than protectionism educateur sounds dangerous and risky and stuff. Why don't we call it the cybersecurity kindergarten? Because that's what we do with the kids. We protect them for the first couple of years, then they reach a certain level, and then we let them out in the wild. Could that be maybe a nicer term?
You're definitely a better wordsmith than I am, so yeah.
Okay, Ulrich had another question.
I actually also two comments in relation to also the latest point. I think that type of educated protectionism is being done today. It's both being done in France, in Germany, in the UK. We can see it happening because somehow when Public tenders are coming in. The way that they're being set up is basically, for instance, in France, it's done in French. It's not being done in English, so therefore it's pretty difficult for any non-French speaking to participate in it, where in other countries it does typically apply. In the UK, for instance, there is a direct positive support to SMEs in the UK, which the large public tenders need to include 25% of SMEs in terms of cybersecurity offerings. So it's somehow being done already. The only thing that's not happening is that that's apparently not taking place on a European scale, which therefore results in the fact that you have European competition in that domain. Another small comment in relation to the very early point in terms of how can you protect software and making sure that the software becomes much better. In the US, there is a scheme, maybe some of you are familiar with it, which is called Software Bill of Materials. It's highly debated, it's extremely complex, but it does help in providing at least some insights in where some of the security deficiencies in software are available. So it's mainly there to protect basically the supply chain. But it also helps in further improving, of course, the security and the product's quality themselves. However, in Europe, it's sort of completely disregarded, more or less. We're not even looking into it that much. But it would help in any case in defining also, at least from product side, how products can further improve, on how software can further improve. And to just give an additional element to this, why it's very useful for companies at least to consider this, is that every company that's selling into the US, public authorities, needs to provide with their products also an SBOM, so Software Bill of Materials. Otherwise, it's not going to be acquired in the next 2 to 3 years. And the US is actually further detailing this and making it much more granular in a way that they're also going to ask for complete assessments of security schemes in those different products. So definitely from a product vendor side in aerospace, it's going to hit you. Many companies that we see, large European vendors like Philips and Schneider Electric, they have to speed up their process. They have now 1,000 products with their SBOMs being capable of selling them into the US.
Thanks, Ulrich. It's impossible not to have you not on the panel. Thank you very much.
But you had a great panel, and I loved your interaction. So.
Thank you very much. There was one more question. Is that? Thank you.
Yeah, I was wondering, we are talking about European cybersecurity industrial policy. I think that cybersecurity is a specific market in the sense that each and every country in Europe wants to have a kind of sovereignty on cybersecurity, which means that each and every country could not be aligned with the European cybersecurity industrial policy. So I was wondering if at some point in time we should, as startup or scale up or whatever, work together. We were talking in the previous panel of collaboration. We talked a lot about collaboration between CISOs and so on, and between users, but not between startups. And I guess that in this area, and it's a question for you, Augustin, how can the venture can help in order to create relationship between European startups, even go to kind of merger and acquisition operations in order to be more efficient and get this critical size faster, even if it's not always the direction of the founders or whatever. But you know, this is really a question of critical size. In the US, a startup can address a wide market and they only have to take the plane. In Europe, it's totally different.
That's a tricky one.
But you have almost 2 minutes left.
Yeah, 2 minutes left.
Okay,
so this is a question of consolidation. Yeah. And for that, everyone turns back to the shareholders of the companies, because in the end, they are the ones merging the companies. You have the founders, obviously, but in the story of startups becoming scale-ups, becoming more mature companies, the founders do fade. Usually, and management comes in. I mean, you have big success story where the founders kept and stayed on the companies, etc. So this is our role as venture, growth equity players, private equity players, shareholders of these companies, to make sure that we intertwine capital between countries. That's why we are a European investor. We invest not only in France, but in Germany, in Spain, etc. And together with Spanish and German investors. So we need to build also this cybersecurity, European cybersecurity, from the shareholders' side, so that we can pull together cybersecurity companies, merge them, align interests between shareholders. It's a nightmare. It's a nightmare because shareholders do come in year 1, year 2, year 3. They have disalignment in exit strategies. And the solution to that is to build bigger funds, bigger cybersecurity funds and bigger growth equity funds to make sure that we provide liquidity to the early stage investors into these young companies becoming scale-ups and then building the cybersecurity champions of Europe. So we are lacking these bigger funds of 1 billion tech growth equity funds that can provide not only primary capital to grow the company, but also secondary capital, cash out capital for early stage investors.
And the good thing is, if I may directly connect, thank you very much, because it is a perfect, that is a perfect last statement from the panel here, because that's exactly what EXO does. We in our work group too, we've been pushing the Commission for this kind of large investment vehicle that we need exactly to achieve this. And may I also draw as a conclusion, if we, and EXO I think is a perfect vehicle for this, because we combine people from all kinds of the cybersecurity value chain across most European countries in a horizontal way. If everyone, if the Basque members and the German members and the French members, the Estonian members, they all go to their governments and say, yes, nationalism is good, but don't overdo it. Let's help, because it can only work through the member states, towards the Commission. Say, in cybersecurity, we need more horizontal cooperation, less national silos, in order to help even our own European users of cybersecurity to become more competitive using our technology on a global scale. So nationalism is good maybe for the top part of national security, but not for the rest. Please let us help building a horizontal digital single market. And I think that's a perfect conclusion here. We had lots of things on the wish list that we want from the Commission. We didn't touch on the topic. If we get 10 billion from the Commission, would we put it to suppliers? Would we sponsor application? Would we sponsor investment and so on? It's probably a mix, but that's for others to discuss. I think we raised a lot of topics in this panel. I hope we could inspire you a little bit, or even trigger questions that you may have to the panelists now that they expose themselves on stage. Please address them after our panel during the final networking session out there. We had great networking so far. Please use it until the last minute. I thank very much my co-panelists, Virginia, Martin, Jalal, and Augustin. And I thank you for being so patient and helping us to close this panel almost exactly in time. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.